Ready? I call to order the policy commission meeting for June 25th. We have in attendance Mr. Flynn, Ms. Heil, and Mr. Campbell, so we have established a quorum. We may have other assembly people. Apparently they're in a work session. They can show up later. We'll record them when they do, and we'll probably chastise them for being late. But just look forward to that. Can I do it for you? We can take turns. So, Craig, can you launch the public service or the public involvement announcement?
Sure. All AMATS meetings are public meetings, and the public is invited to comment. If we have a business item, we'll have presentation by a staff or by a consultant, and then the committee will have an opportunity to discuss it, and then at that point, the public will be invited to comment on things.
Thank you. We have in front of us today's proposed agenda.
Move to approve.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any particular amendments or corrections anybody'd like to suggest? Any objection to the agenda then as presented? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. We have minutes from May 28th in front of us.
Move to approve.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any corrections? Look good. Sal, anything that you are, any objection to approval of the minutes? Seeing none, the minutes are approved. Thank you. Business items. Our first item is the Citizens Advisory Committee. Mr. Lyon, are you going to talk to us about this?
We'll run through this fairly quickly. What you have before you is the proposed bylaws for a Citizens Advisory Committee. At your last meeting, the Policy Committee voted to adopt an operating agreement amendment that proposed this creation, which also included the idea that we have these bylaws and a recruitment policy. So I've included both of them for you. At the technical committee 2 weeks ago, the technical committee voted to recommend that you release these for a 30-day public review. So they are here before you today, both the bylaws and the recruitment memo.
So the action before us is to release for public comment for 30 days. Thank you. Anybody from the public have a comment to make? Yes, sir.
Mark Butler, the manager of the Community Council Center. We did not receive a copy of the recruitment memo, and it says that the FCC gets a seat on this organization. We hope that we would have direct contact, especially if we're going to be sitting on it. And then we have questions as to how I only got the copy of this from a member of the public that sent it to me. So we wonder how this has gone out public. I did not receive one to send to the public or send to all of our presidents or other initiatives.
Voting today to release it to the public, sir.
Yeah, so it hasn't been released.
This is dated June 11th?
This was before the technical committee 2 weeks ago, so it was up then.
So it has not been released to the public yet?
Correct. No, the policy committee would.
Yeah, okay, so I'm talking about the recruitment memo, not the bylaws. That as well? Okay, and then would it be sent to the FCC so we could distribute it? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
info@communitycouncils.org.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Flynn?
I'll move to release this for public comment.
Any comments, questions, concerns?
I would note, or Mr. Butler, since he's very engaged throughout the city, part of the requirement is that there's at least one member from each of the 6 assembly districts, as well as an FCC member. So reaching out across the spectrum of our community is going to be a crucial portion of this, and to the extent you can help affect that, I'm sure Mr. Lyon would really appreciate it.
Your comments? Okay. Can you second that just for?
Oh, second.
Thank you. No, do you have any comments?
Yes.
Thank you.
I guess it's confusing between, is this a policy or a memo? If it's a policy, then shouldn't it be formatted as a particular policy? Or as a memo, what does memos mean in the context of what we do, how we do business? Because I don't think we ever heard just memos. We have policies, and we have agreements, and we have bylaws.
So when I first drafted this was just kind of in the memo format, because when the discussion occurred at the TAC, there seemed to me to be a difference of opinion on whether or not this should be included in the policies and procedures, or whether it should just be some language that we have out there in this format, or whether we should do anything at all. So that's why it's in this memo format, to kind of let you folks kick it around and decide what you want to do. I did not hear any clear consensus at the TAC that it should be proposed as a policy and procedure.
That's a different process, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, doing a policy and procedure change is a different process than simply submitting this for public response. And we actually did speak to that specifically if you look at page 3 of the minutes from last month, whether this was a policy change that might, a standard question, does this open us up to the new world order?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's not a redesignation.
Right.
Okay,
So-
so it's not an operating agreement change at all.
Right, so we
So this is
we
just-
did have that discussion.
Right, right. But what it is that we are setting a policy, and it's just a formatting, it's just a release. Doesn't, whether we do a policy, we just have to put policy number, what, is it 7 now? 8?
Yay.
8? So just, but all we have to do is say policy number 8 and have it out for public comment, and then it would be consistent with everything else we have.
I'd be happy to retain a friendly amendment.
I do remember the discussion at the technical committee when this was originally brought up, and some members felt it should be a policy. Some members felt it should just be left up to staff and we wouldn't even need this level. So you folks can do obviously what you want to do, but the discussion at the TAC was that.
It was a split. I think what you want to do is you want to have it as a policy that would be changed over time, because you want something that's very defensible, that's transparent, that's very clear on how you recruited these people. Because if we're challenged, if someone does not get appointed to another committee, they're going to say, well, why wasn't I? And you need to be able to say, this is the procedures and the process that we followed, and so that it's.
Can I cut you off for a minute? Let's either have a motion to modify something, or let's move on, but let's not just have a debate here amongst
It
us.
wasn't a debate, it was just a comment.
Okay, so are you proposing to make a change to, you'd like to make an amendment?
Well, he made a friendly amendment to put
He
the,
suggested he would be
and I would be
amenable to
second,
one.
yeah.
Wow, it's even tougher pulling 2 of you. 5 of you usually.
Everyone has to get along now, Mr. Chairman. Ain't that a son of a gun?
So now I get, the motion is to have this release as a policy, a draft policy, whatever it is.
Okay, so we have a proposed modification to the amendment to release it as a policy. Mr. Flynn?
I would happily second that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so we have 2 things in
Get
front of
along.
us. Does anybody have any comments on the proposed policy release? Yes,
Just
sir.
a procedural question, is there a scheduled period of time in which this is, I don't see it on this previous memo, as to whether it be a month or week or whatever?
I believe
I need to
30
send that
days is
information.
the time, 30 days is the recommended.
30 days after the memo comes to us?
30 days from whenever we
Today.
release it, which I'm assuming would be today.
Thank you.
Sure.
Welcome, Mr. Peterson.
Just in time. Just in time. Any further discussion on we're going to take forward the amendment now to the original motion. Any further discussion on that? Any objection amongst the board to releasing it as a policy? Seeing none, it is approved to release it as a policy. Now, the primary motion was to release it for a 30-day public comment period. We've had discussion on that. Is there any objection to releasing it for a 30-day public comment period? Seeing none, we will release it for 30 days as of today under the title of a policy. Thank you.
And that included the bylaws, right?
The package.
The package, oh.
Thank you. We now have in front of us the air quality conformity memo for the interim 2035 MTP. Ms. Underwood.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Vivian Underwood. I'm Senior Transportation Planner with the municipality and staff to AMATS. You have a memo and a copy of the air quality conformity determination for the companion document, which is the interim 2035 MTP, which is the next item on the agenda. This is a pretty straightforward document. It is a spin-off of the air quality conformity determination that was prepared for the 2015-18 TIF. It has 2014 data that's been added, And I'd like to thank Teresa Brewer for putting together the consultation team on this that's required with other agencies that included the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal FTA, and Ms. Heil represented ADEC. And they were all in agreement with this approach. And so the bottom line is that it's been determined that the MTP will not undermine the ability of the Muni to maintain compliance with the National Air Quality Conformity Standards for carbon monoxide or PM10, both in Anchorage and Eagle River. So we're asking for a release for 30 days for public review and comment. And we'll take it back to the Technical Advisory Committee and then bring their recommendation back to you in July or August.
Okay. Thank you. Can you stand by in case there's any questions we have to direct at you?
Yes.
Hopefully there won't be, but let me ask the audience first. Does anybody have any questions on the proposed release of this document for public comment for 30 days? Okay, you've survived that hurdle. Mr. Steele,
Sorry about being late.
that's fine.
Indisposed there for a little bit.
I heard you had other work you were doing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any comments on the release of the air quality conformity document?
I
Or concerns you'd
did
like-
not hear any reason why we should not.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Any questions or comments from Ms. Underwood?
Yeah, just a couple quick ones. And I'm not sure if I'm asking the right person or not, but we have long battled PM10 requirements in the Eagle River area.
Yes.
And I apologize, I did not have a chance to go through this as thorough as I usually do before the meeting. How are we doing performance-wise in, first off, avoiding violations, and secondly, getting it, well, making sure we don't have future violations?
I know more about Anchorage than I do about Eagle River, and I apologize, but we are now a limited maintenance area, which is good for us, which means that we no longer have to do the modeling. We can just rely on monitoring. And
We don't have any monitors in Eagle River, do we?
I'm sorry,
Do we have any monitors in Eagle River? I thought they were all in the bowl.
well, for PM10.
Okay.
For PM10, the problem in Eagle River is PM10
Mm.
and attainment status. Let's see.
On page 5 towards the back is
Looking at that.
is the measured values for the PM10 area.
There's-
So Ms. Heil may actually be able to help us with it.
Shouldn't have spoken up there.
I mean, does this constitute, have we had any actual exceedances?
No,
We
no.
did,
Well,
and that's why we have to do the monitoring. I was just sort of seeing how we're doing.
Anchorage, we came really close to going down attainment for PM10
Mhm.
because we have these wind-blown dust events that happen in the spring and the fall when we're right in the middle of the freeze thaw
Mhm.
sequence. The historical problem in Eagle River was road dust, and those were all paved. So what happened is we were in attainment for a long time. We finally went to limited maintenance plans to make things easier and conformity for everybody. So if PM10 is a 150 micrograms per cubic meter is the standard, we're showing on this table at 2.1 that we're 92.8. So we're well below the standard. We go to the, like in Anchorage, we did our first 10-year maintenance plan. We've now done some of the maintenance plans, our second-year maintenance plan. And hopefully within that time period, then we'll be able to remove the requirements completely and we'll be attained.
What's the time frame for that?
For Anchorage, it's another 10 years.
And for Eagle River?
Eagle River, this was their first 10-year plan, so we have another second 10-year plan.
Okay. And then the only other question, and this probably also isn't for Vivian, but how in the world, I thought we picked up 3 share ride vans from Fairbanks last year, and how are we not at a higher level than we were in 2011? That's on page 2.
Is share ride participation down from that, or is it up?
Share ride participation has been reducing. I believe the 3 vans from Fairbanks went into the contingency fleet because they were in the process of doing a purchase, and they needed to make sure that their their active fleet had the required numbers of contingency vehicles from what I can remember.
And on page 7 shows the monitor and Eagle River's parking.
I'm surprised to see the share participation dropping, but okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Heil, any comments?
I would just remind folks that the air quality conformity is the only thing that FHWA approves actually on our interim MTPs or our TIPs. So the air quality conformity is the big thing that we have to approve to make sure that FHWA approves it so that then our stuff is active. Air quality conformity has to be approved first, which is why we're doing it first before the interim MTP, so that's a requirement. And I encourage us to approve it today.
Thank you.
Do you have an order for DEC?
Yeah. Or at least for public comment, I should say.
I would love to do that if we had a motion on the table to.
I'll defer to our air quality expert.
Move to release the draft air quality conformity determination for the interim 2035 MTP.
I'd be happy to second that, Mr. Chairman.
Moved and seconded. We've had opportunity. Mr. Steele, do you have any further comments on this?
I do not.
Take a vote. Mrs. Flynn, Ms. Heil, any further comments? Any objection to passing this as brought forward? Seeing none, we will release that for 30 days. Thank you. Our next item on there is, thank you, Vivian, are you back for the
Yes, sir.
MTP? Okay, we'll hold your position for just a second. The draft interim 2035 MTP is next on our agenda. It's underway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, each of you has a memo and the draft document for this item. The last 2035 MTP air quality conformity determination was approved on May 25th, 2012. And we've had some presentations to you before about the status of this item, and I think you all know that we had a draft before the Technical Advisory Committee last month. They had 2 work sessions. They were pretty happy with the document, and they had basically editorial comments. So this document has been through their review. And we're coming before you today to ask for release for public review for 30 days. As Ms. Heil said, the FHWA and FTA do not approve the MTP, but they do approve the air quality conformity determination, which implies a de facto approval of the financial plan. What is new about this document over the 2035 MTP is Chapter 4, basically, which is the status of the system in the 2035 MTP. We took the opportunity not to just rehash the same information, because we are following guidance provided by this body to use the 2035 horizon year and the 2035 modeling and all of the assumptions that went along with that. But Chapter 4 is dedicated to projects that have been completed since then. Chapter 6 is the financial plan, which includes a new Chapter 7A on the kindergarten crossing, which was provided to us by those folks. And Chapter 7 is projects. That includes all the projects that were recommended in the 2035 MTP. And Chapter 8 is the implementation plan. And we took this opportunity to create more of a report card of what staff has been doing for all of the action items that were in Section 8. We've either been working on or have started close to 98% of those action items. So it's pretty straightforward. The Federal Highway Administration likes the financial planning tool that was presented to them in our last certification review, and they just requested that we simplify the information in here because there were so many tables that were, it was information overload for the average person. So on page 6-2, there's a fiscal constraint summary, and what the federal people wanted us to do was just take out all the year-by-year information that is in Appendix D and just give a quick summary. So by the end of 2035, the bottom line is that we still have a surplus of funds, and we can reasonably estimate that we'll have enough money through the next 20 years to cover all the projects in the plan. We're not adding any projects, and we're not deleting any projects. And that was by guidance from the policy committee. If we did either, we would have to go back and do modeling, and the model update is not finished yet. It won't be finished for another year. So this update has to be approved the air quality conformity determination has to be approved by the end of 2015 for this document to have the required 20-year horizon.
So if I may summarize it, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is basically just the previous document. We are continuing the previous document for another 2 years under this, and you have for another 4 years, okay? And we have consolidated some information into a new chapter on Kinnick Arm, and we've updated our progress from the original date of this document, which was what, 2011?
2012, and the
2012.
financial plan.
And the financial plan, okay. So it's essentially a continuation of the existing document with some updates on what we've accomplished to date, if you will. So there's nothing particularly new in here, it's just a continuation so we can keep our federal approval for our program in place.
Because it was
Thank you.
expiring.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I will now cast my eye to the crowd and say, are there any questions or comments for Ms. Underwood or people who would like to make statements just in general? Mr. Kenworthy?
Well, I have no comment.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Trying to head him
I've
off
never
the
been
path.
asked for a comment. You were looking right at me, I thought you were just loading up some steam or something. Okay, no other comments there. Mr. Steele, any comments?
No comments.
Mr. Flynn?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, the dearth of check marks. The complete column is a little bit bothersome. That's a comment.
Okay, thank
Question is 141, page 7-11. Does anybody have any idea when that's going to be executed, or at least released? Jennifer? Anybody?
It's the Glen Seward
Seward
Highway
Glen,
Connection Phase 3 environmental document.
I believe it's within the short term, which is
Yes,
the
it is.
first half of the MPP.
That was a very good non-answer.
Thank you.
And that's about all I have.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Well, would anybody care to make a motion?
I'll move to release the draft AMATS interim 2035 MPP for public review.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Mr. Steele? Mr. Flynn? Ms. Heil? Chair Lyons, is there any objection to this? Releasing this? Mr. Flynn, any objection? No, sir? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We next have, are you finished now, Vivian?
Yes, except I would like
Show
to
today.
tell the assembly members that we will have an information item for you all as quickly as possible. I'm crafting the memo right now. And I actually don't know if the assembly would like to have a presentation. I don't know what the procedure is, if there's a presentation involved or just to be on hand to answer questions for an information item.
Vivian, we can probably carry this for you as long as you're available that evening.
Super, thank you. Oh, but before we get off of this subject, I'd like to thank the project team. We had Brian Hill with PTC Engineers, Inc. He was absolutely super. And Aaron Young-Dillon with DOT and PF. He's now the AMATS planner, by the way. And all of the AMATS staff, everybody, this was definitely a team effort. And we really worked great together. It was a fun project.
Good. Thank you.
I'm quite frankly surprised you guys got it done. It was a big chore to get done, and it buys us.
It was a miracle.
Those miracles coming.
Thank
All
you.
right, thanks again.
You're welcome.
ITS architecture approval memo. Mr. Lyon, who will be? Oh,
It's the Vivian show.
Yeah.
Did I tell you that?
Well, in that
This is the
case-
last time they found it.
I'm Vivian all the time.
We have 10 minutes with, I know you have a 10-minute limit. I've got 15 seconds to tell you that today we're pleased to have our consultant team with us. Les Jacobson with Parsons Brinkerhoff prepared the first architecture in 2000 that was adopted in 2004, and he's done this. He's also working on the state's ITS architecture. And we have Carly Slayton Barker with Solstice for doing public involvement. And also Dan Kretschmer with Cambridge Systematics helped with the integration with the congestion management process update. So the ITS architecture is a secondary plan for AMATS. It's not a primary plan. It's more technical, and it's probably more used by project managers and planners. Probably, I would be very surprised if anybody in this room ever had the occasion to actually look at it. But it is for that purpose.
Really? How long have you been in this room?
Well, I should tell you, though, that for federally funded construction projects, the municipality follows the state pre-construction manual, and there is a section in there that requires project managers to look at ITS and to do a systems engineering checklist when they have to do that, and which involves using the ITS architecture. So this is at a level that we need to pay attention to. So there's that, and also that the public involvement for this project, because it is a secondary plan, has focused on agency stakeholders, operations type folks. It's not the kind of plan that we put out to the general public. We didn't do that previously, and we won't do that this time. And so we're coming before you today. I realize this is the first time you've seen it, but it has had good review at the technical advisory committee level. We've had 3 workshops with stakeholders and for use and maintenance, and we're asking for your approval today, your review and approval. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jacobson, and he can explain all of this to you.
Good. Thank you. So ITS is Intelligent Transportation Systems. It's really just technology and transportation. And what I want to do today is give you some information about this architecture. The architecture is really just a blueprint of how different intelligent transportation system elements need to connect in order to be able to share information and share data. And then I'll talk a little bit about the actual architecture documents and then seek your approval. The original architecture was done early in the whole process of developing ITS architectures. It was pretty dense, if you will. It was pretty technical, and one of the issues with that is people don't understand it very well. And so what we've gone through is to update it to make it more user-friendly, easier to understand, but it still meets all the requirements, the federal guidance, and it's consistent also with the statewide architecture. We actually had 3 parts of the project. First was to update the architecture itself, and then there was some coordination as part of that, especially with the congestion management process. And then we also developed a use and maintenance guide so that people who do want to use it and maintain it, there's some good kind of guidance on how to do that. So the purpose of the document or of the architecture is really to make sure that investments are not wasted, if you will, that we can make the most use out of the investments so that we look forward to how the different components will fit together so that we can plan for that, we can design for that, and we can implement that. As Vivian said, we had the stakeholder involvement was really from other agencies. We interviewed stakeholders. We had 3 different workshops. Stakeholders also reviewed the documents, and we had a series of status update calls nominally every 2 weeks. So the structure itself is that the architecture is broken into what we call service areas that are tailored to Anchorage. So there is a national ITS architecture that provides a framework, and these service areas are really those items that someone in a particular field might be most interested in. So for example, the transit operations field would be where people mover would look and would see all of the connections that they would have with their technologies. We also took several documents and kind of combined them into one. In the initial architecture, we had 7 or 8 documents. Nominally, they were chapters of a whole, but some of them were over 100 pages long. So they were very large documents. And we've simplified that, put it into one document that's tailored. We had a bunch of very complex diagrams to explain this, and we have simplified this so in any of the service areas, it's much easier for someone to see where they are and how things go. The way this works, just real quickly, is, for example, there might be some, in this traveler information area, some information that could come from some sort of a traffic monitoring system that would come into a service provider of some sort. That could be the state, it could be the municipality, it could be a private sector party, and then that goes out and is provided as information to different entities. So that's essentially how these are structured to make it much easier to see than the older diagrams. We included in the use and maintenance essentially how to use the architecture for 4 different types of activity: for planning, for program development, for project development, and for design. And then there's a section, about half of it, that would explain how to update the architecture, or as we call it, maintain it. So anytime there's a change, that can be done rather than redoing the entire architecture. And I'll just highlight the use for planning. One of the things that needs to happen is, if federal funds are going to be used for ITS in a project, then that project has to be in the ITS architecture. So when planners are first starting to look at the architecture, or starting to look at a project that would include ITS, it's important for them to be able to make sure that they can find it in the architecture. So that's one of the uses. It also helps to identify stakeholders, so as they're planning, they would know who else to include, especially as some of these components may need to connect with the components of the stakeholders. For program development, it's actually pretty similar. It's a way that we can identify that the project is in the architecture, identify who the stakeholders are, and then be able to provide feedback if new ITS elements or activities are not present in the architecture. When it comes to the project development, so now we're actually got some funding and we're starting to look at putting the project together. Then in addition to looking at those elements, we can also fill out that systems engineering checklist that Vivian was talking about that's a requirement. And then finally, for design, in addition to all of the other things to identify where the project is, the architecture does provide an ability for them to pull out some requirements that they might want to use for project design, identify standards that they would want to incorporate in the contract documents, and then again, if any of them are any of the ITS elements are not in the architecture, to provide feedback to update that architecture. Another element that is part of this project is to put together an implementation plan. This really is not a plan that you might think of as a transportation plan. It's really looking at those components and elements and strategies that are identified in the architecture, and identifying when the municipality would have the capability, not from a resource perspective, but from a technology perspective, to do those things, so that we don't get projects identified early that really have a predecessor that has to be done before the project can be built. So that's the primary area for the implementation plan. It does not establish priorities. So it's not that kind of planning document. It just says, here are the dependencies, if you will, for these types of strategies. And that's kind of the quick and dirty of it. I know I kind of went fast. Do you have any questions?
I'm sure we will, but hang on just a second. And I do appreciate your brevity. That's always much appreciated around here, for me at least.
What, you have something else to do?
Yeah, just a few things. Let me ask the audience first if there's any questions or concerns from the people back there. I see people looking at the floor, looking out the window. No questions. Okay. Mr. Steele, do you have any questions or comments for
I was just going to look out the window.
Mr.
No, I don't. I'll have to admit that I have not gone through this in detail, but I will.
We can all admit that. Mr. Flynn, can you go back a slide, Mr. Jacobson?
Sure.
And you're based in Seattle, is that correct?
Yes.
I think, based on my low-level knowledge of ITS, this includes our below-ground vehicle detection systems at our stoplights.
Those are part of the kind of traffic signal system element, yeah.
Okay. One of the things I am curious about is above-ground detection technology, which appears to be improving. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm putting on my transportation geek hat here for a little bit.
Go for it.
If we were interested in implementing some of that technology, does the plan incorporate that, or would we need to amend it?
Yeah, so the architecture is technology neutral. So it will have something about detection, but it doesn't matter what type of detection that you use. So absolutely, it could be radar, it could be something that we don't even know about right now.
As long as it ties into the network.
Right.
Okay. That was my primary.
You're thinking photo radar? Is that what you're thinking?
No. No, but I'm being a little.
Been there, done.
I'm being a little parochial here. I've got a light near my house where if you're not right there when the other light turns red, you can't get through, and video detection might improve that. Anyway.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Heil, any further questions or comments? And I guess I don't have any either. So do we have a motion in front of us to take some action on this, please?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I need to draw to your attention that I grabbed the wrong document to post it on the web. You have the right document in front of you. Page 8 does include detection of bicycles at intersections, whether by, and it is, Les has it up there, but I just wanted you to know that the public didn't actually have that copy.
Well, and actually, can I jump on that for?
Sure, go ahead.
This might be Johnny's. We've dealt with the below-ground vehicle detection devices that don't pick up bicycles if they're not correctly centered in a transit lane. Do we have anything here that accommodates better signalization for bike commuters?
Do we have anything that's implemented already?
Both, or is contemplated by this?
Yeah, I think, well, we had a training last night, a bikeway design training that discussed some infrared technologies as well as video technologies. I don't know that the video is working as well in winter climates. That has some issues with being obscured and things like that. I don't know, and radar, I don't know exactly what's been implemented so far. That's probably a good question for Stephanie Marmillo, our traffic engineer.
She didn't want to answer it.
There's actually a lot of work being done right now all across the world to make bike detection better under a variety of conditions. So what's possible today really is quite a bit better than just even a couple of years ago.
And what are you seeing in terms of using video detection in northern climates, subarctic climates? I know what the marketers tell me, but
to be honest with you, video detection is kind of becoming less popular because you have a lot of issues with visible spectrum. You know, just simple things like getting dust and slush on the lens and the requirements to clean those. There's just a whole lot of things. Where video and it's more infrared is kind of on the increase is for road weather information systems and the environmental sensor stations, because they don't have to have the device in the pavement. There's some really good mostly infrared detection that can tell you if there's snow or ice or water over ice or whatever the case may be on the roadway. But in most every other area, video as a detection mechanism is going down. Video just to see what's happening is much on the rise.
So the below ground technology is sort of the tried and true that everyone's holding for signal detection?
Well, radar detection is another one. There's a variety of different types of detectors. There are some very small detectors that go in the pavement rather than loops, and it just really depends on two things usually. One is what's your climate like, and two, what's your pavement like, whether loops are good or not. Most places are actually starting to move away from loops as well, unless it's a benign climate with good pavements. So in the Seattle area, they're still using loops because they last forever there.
That's what we have too. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments, questions? Ms. Heil?
I'll move that we for final adoption, the Anchorage Regional ITS architecture update.
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion, Mr. Steele? Mr. Flynn?
Can't believe Vivian didn't think I would know about this stuff.
I'd just like to clarify that this would be for the architecture, the use and maintenance guide, and the implementation plan, all three documents.
Okay.
Is that contained in our package?
Yes.
We have everything there.
This wasn't in the
Uno,
title.
dos,
Tres?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Really, really.
And its attachments, how does that sound?
Okay. So we've got before us a motion to approve the ITS architecture,
And attachments.
the use and maintenance guide, and the architecture implementation plan. Would that be correct? And it's been seconded. Any objection to that? Seeing none, it's approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Informational reports. Mr. Lyon, we have a status of ports, waterways, and aviation.
We do, and we are fortunate today to have our Deputy Port Director, Sharon Walsh, a TAC member, here to present.
Okay. I would also like to acknowledge that our port director is here too.
Board director is here.
Yeah, that guy's here.
Okay.
Just see how much I've really learned in the last year, and partly if there's questions.
Sharon's second in command.
Is this?
There you go. At least that's how we say it. Okay. 10 minutes.
Please.
Port of Anchorage.
Start the clock.
There we go. First thing first, making the technology happen here, which we're not. Okay. Under uninterrupted service since 1961, that's when the original port structure was built. So we've been around that long. This being 50-something years later, we'll talk about the life of the port in a little bit. But in 1964, the port took on some increased importance because with the earthquake. Ports of Seward and Whittier and Valdez all had damage due to tsunami, and Port of Anchorage, not being susceptible to tsunami geologically, all of a sudden became a more reliable or conservative place to put your freight operations. Not that Seward and Whittier and Valdez aren't important, get it important on their own. Okay, so that's what we look like today, more or less. These are our facilities. We have 3 cargo terminals, 1 barge berth. We call it the dry barge berth. That means that it goes dry during low tide, and we use the kind of barge that can just perch there till the tide comes back in. 2 petroleum terminals, and we also offload cement to the petroleum terminals. We have 2.8 million barrels of petroleum storage, but that is going to change fairly dramatically, fairly shortly. Delta Western is building a methanol tank right now, and they'll supplement that with some additional tanks at their new farm as market conditions allow. And Crowley Maritime is actually bringing on some new tanks. They're bringing an old tank back into service, or an empty tank back into service, and then they're increasing storage for J-Bear as a result of some closures of some storage on the West Coast. So that's number's going to change.
That's the old Chevron facility?
Yes. Okay. We have 3 gantry cranes, which is the ones that go over and pick up the containers and bring them back. We have 2 miles of rail spur that connects to the railroad, 3 regional pipelines, 1 going to J-Bear, the one that comes in from Nikiski, and 1 that goes out to the airport. We have right now 20,000 tons of cement storage, and ABI has a project in the works to increase that so that they won't run out of cement during the winter. And we're also a national strategic seaport. When we were selected for that, we were the 19th, and I think they're up to 26 now.
23.
23 total. And what that means is that we are important to deployments, to the defense capability to quickly get where they need to go, and using our port to get there. We're really J-Bear's port, if you think about it, and it's how many joint bases are literally connected to a port, so that's pretty cool. We're a secure facility, 24/7, 365, and that is why we have to ask people's patience when trying to access the port. There's an awful, you'll see later on, we have 100% of the fuel going to J-Bear. We got a lot of stuff going on there that are actually kind of nice, juicy targets for people with nefarious purposes. So we have to keep that stuff protected. And we're centrally located with both road and rail access, and also out to the airport to move on to bush communities. Okay, what's our main transportation function? Well, freight, to manage the smooth handling of freight. And we very recently, April this year, finished a study, the McDowell Group finished a study for us to truth the numbers. What really % of incoming freight to South Central do we have? You might have heard in earlier publications, 90% for 80% of the population. We wanted some recent numbers, so we had this commissioned. And of the freight that comes to South Central Alaska and then on to other areas, 74% of it's coming into Anchorage, 15% to Whittier, and 11% to Seward, Homer, Kenai, other ports. And that's some of our cargo situation. There's one of the gantry cranes lifting the trailer, and a container off trailer, and then there you can see where they stage all those containers back there in the backlands, and the full stuff comes in off the boat, and the empties start coming in a day or two before the ship's coming back in, and it's actually quite a show on a Tuesday or a Sunday when all that stuff, all those moving parts are moving. Okay, petroleum distribution. This is really an interesting story this year especially, and you'll see that in a little bit, but our petroleum tanker deliveries have increased by,
Oh gosh, well, from 313 to 14 last
right,
year to
so,
pushing 18 this year.
Yeah, almost quadruple, and we'll get into the reasons for that in a little bit. But this is our POL facility where the fuel comes out of the tanker into our petroleum distribution area and then goes out to the different tank farms. And it's interestingly from the study of the petroleum, refined petroleum comes into South Central, 95% of it comes to Anchorage. So that's 0.4 comes from Nikiski or from and around. So it's a significant amount. And 100% of the jet fuel for J-Bear comes across our port. So that's pretty significant. Okay, how did our 2014, this is how things broke out. Container ships, that's the Tuesday and Sunday ships, which is Tote, and what used to be known as Horizon is now Matson. So they've obviously got the bulk of it. The tugs have a bulk amount because they're escorting those ships. Then we have cement ships. We get about 5 of those every summer. They stay on the dock about 10 days, give or take, depending on the weather. They come from overseas. We have 9 cruise ships this year. We'll have 10 next. We had 4 last year, so that's been kind of a nice bonus. not so much. We don't get a lot of income off of that, but it's certainly a nice bonus for the downtown Anchorage economy. And military vessels right now, we have the USS Shoup. You saw that in the paper. You know, there wasn't a lot of noise about that because they just decided about 10 days ago to come. So we're scrambling to accommodate them. The main purpose was liberty for the sailors after Northern Edge, and it's really been fun to just welcome them here. So yeah, lots of sailors in town right now until Saturday. Petroleum tankers that we talked about already. And then petroleum barges, those come from Valdez and come in a smaller volume than the tankers, but fairly steady. Okay, did I skip one? No. Okay, this is our 10-year tonnage history. Now this goes through 2014, and the one to be, come on, hitting the right button. There we go. So a couple of trends here to notice. The blue is petroleum shoreside. That's the petroleum that used to come from Flint Hills, or that's the petroleum that's going through our valve yard. And you'll see it's decreased, and a lot of that is because of the Flint Hills refinery shutting down, and not as much is coming down on train and coming into the valve yard that way. The green is dockside, and you'll see that's kind of held steady. What you don't see is 2015, which is year to date already 25% higher than all of last year.
Well, year to date,
we're 25% higher, right? So good thing he's on the team. And that's significant. And one of the reasons for that, besides Flint Hills and offsetting the Flint Hills fuel that's not coming there anymore, is the airport. And the airport is using quite a lot more fuel for two reasons. One thing that kind of kicked it up a little was the longshore strike in the West Coast ports. And what's interesting about that, some carriers went to air cargo just to get over the hump, and some of that's remained. They just decided it worked out for them. But a bigger thing is that, again, it's back to air crossroads of the world, because you know, the 777s can actually overfly us. You can go from China to Chicago, and with all your Apple iPads, and that's just, you can do it. But to do it, you have to, in your weight and balance, a lot of your weight's got to be in fuel. Well, the iPad people are paying you to bring iPads. The fuel is just, you're not getting paid to carry that around. So it's working out much better for them to load up more product and go lighter on the fuel, stop here, refuel, and then go on. So that's why we're seeing this increase, and it's substantial. So it's really interesting. There are containers. That's the gold bar, and that has kind of held steady. We only shop so much, eat so much, drive so many cars. But interestingly enough, this year container cargo is up 12.5%. Same time last year. So things are moving, things are happening. Okay, our operating revenue is cooking along. It's slightly up, and we expect 15 to be even higher based on what the numbers I'm just giving you. Okay, so we're moving a lot of freight. We are pretty vital to the state economy. Most of you know that. And now we'll get into some stuff that maybe some of you have seen before on the Enterprise Committee. But the thing is, we're reaching the end of our useful life, and all this freight is coming across a dock that's getting a little old and creaky. I identify with our dock, but so what we do, as you can see, we've had random sampling done over the years, and we're to do just random samples. When you see the loss, 67% loss, that's in piling thickness. So those are scary numbers. Those are real numbers. 67%, 55%, 59%, 71% loss in the thickness of the walls of that piling. We have a thing called low water or water accelerated tide water corrosion. And it's just a condition that exists where we are, and it eats away at those things. So to keep from falling over and just driving a crane on the dock and having it sink, we've been putting jackets on these piles. Think of them as Band-Aids, because that's really what they are. We put a steel jacket around, fill the annulus with concrete, and that gives us a little more strength. It doesn't repair them to full strength. It only brings them back to where they can handle more gravity load. We do not get any increased lateral stability from this patch. So when we get a shake or any lateral forces, we get a little nervous over there. So it cost about $3 million to do 100 of them. We've been able to do out of our yearly operating funds. We allocate about $3 million a year to just patch piles. So as you all know, and depending on what kind of age of a house you live in, you get to a certain point where it might even be worth it just tear it down and start over.
Tried that.
Yeah. So that's really where it's most cost effective. So that's why the port modernization project, I'll zip through this pretty quickly. I know a lot of you have heard it before, but for folks who haven't, this is the existing configuration of the dock. This is the completed port modernization project. This is I think that represents a cement ship, red. So we'll walk through. The tricky part is that you saw all this volume we have, all this business that's happening, all these goods that are coming in. That's got to keep happening while we do the project. And the trickiest part of this was figuring out how to do it without disrupting, our customers. So, phases. Phase 1, new cement dock over here, a POL and cement. Ships can be offloaded here. That's the first thing to build, get that operation out of the way. That's over here, the cement facilities are right here, and then there'll be pipelines again, connecting back into the system. Other thing that happens is our building right now, we have beautiful views, we're right on the water, but we're taking up some real estate. It's really better used for cargo operations. So we'll be moving off the dock for life safety first, get us off that rickety structure in case we do get that quake, and also to make the more efficient use of the space. So since we're going to go to the back of the port, I'm lobbying for like a lighthouse. Wouldn't that be cool? And then we could rotate at the top, just like a Space Needle. I think that would be nice. I'm just saying.
Don't overpromise right now.
Oh, yeah, that was just suggesting how you were.
You're on a tight budget, young man.
No restaurant at the top going around?
Yeah. So I was thinking revenue.
May as well go.
Okay. So anyway, moving on. That didn't go anywhere. The other thing that has to happen is a project. So what's happened here in step 2? We've built this new dock. POL and cement have that option. They can still work at the alternate POL option here. We need to remove this area fill, and I'm not going to go into detail as to the why, but let's just suffice it to say it's unstable. It needs to be stabilized and made go out of there. And also, it's causing a sedimentation problem right here that's really costing extra dredging, and that needs to be removed to help with that. So that's step 2. Step 3. Okay, the new cement dock's happening here. Step 3, Toad's going to keep working here. Matson would be we would build a new facility for Matson, move them over there. Once that's constructed, then we'll move Toad over to this one. Let me see. Yeah. Move Matson to here, build a new one for Matson, move them here, then keep Toad here while they're building this one for Toad. And then when that's complete, you take this one out, and that's our new configuration. And then you finally finish with rebuilding the second POL facility. What's different about this too, you'll notice they're further out into the inlet, and that helps quite a bit. A little bit better current, a little less siltation, deeper draft. We can go to 45 feet below mean lower low. Mean lower low. Right now we're at 35, so it gives us 10 feet more draft. So that's the sequencing. Now how are we going to, what's going on with the money? Some of you are painfully aware of these numbers. We do actually have enough money, that's kind of hard to read, but we have enough to do phase 1 to get us off the back of the, move the buildings, get them into the backlands and build the new POL cement facility, which that's all proceeding. And actually, I've applied for a port security grant on the basis that it's a security issue too to get that building off the dock. So you never know, we might get a few $million for that. So we're turning over all the couch cushions. Then the north extension, stabilized north extension, we can get a little more than halfway through that with the money we've got. And so we would need an additional $64 million. We have 130 right now, so we need another $64 million to get through phase 2. Then phases 3 and 4, we need to still find the money for that. So that's another $290-something million. Okay, well, so we are, point of all this is we are progressing, we have work to do, and we're getting done as much as we possibly can so that we're ready as soon as we can secure the funds for the rest. And this is kind of hard to read, but you're seeing what's happening right now. We're actually pretty on schedule with this. We are permitting for the test pile program, and we actually have the test pile contract has been bid out, and Kiewit was the successful bidder, but we have to wait for the permits to finish before they can start work. So probably starting work next spring, unless permitting really goes fast this fall. But all of that's on track and ready to go. While that's happening, we're programming for the landside buildings, the landside studies, where to put us, what we need to do the same function or as efficiently as possible. So that's happening now. Design build procurement will go out towards the end of this year, and those buildings will be designed next year, probably get constructed in 2017. And we do, again, have the money for that. Then the other green is permitting for the marine structures. That's the north stabilization. We're doing preliminary design, and right about here, middle of next year, we should be the point where to actually go out for a full design with the designers of record for that. Our project management contractor right now is doing the preliminary stuff, but there comes a time it's time to turn over to the people who are actually going to design it. So that's our schedule at this date. That's it. Questions?
Oh, there will be a few, I'm sure. Thank you for hustling through it. I'd like to request that people do not relive the entire Port of Anchorage financial history or engineering history or anything else here today. There's been plenty of discussion of that in various media outlets and in cocktail parties and other places, assembly chambers. So let's try not to relive that if we can resist. Does anybody from the crowd have any concise comments or questions for Ms. Walsh? Mr. Board Director, would you like to interrogate her on a few things there? Or?
No, we did that beforehand.
Mr. Steele, did you have any questions?
It's a great presentation. We've got an enterprise committee coming up, and you probably relive some of that in there as well. But I'm glad you're keeping after it. The growth is actually pretty surprising in some respects. We've still got some challenges ahead, I'm sure, but hopefully there'll be some lawsuit settlements and all kinds of things, and manna will come from the sky.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn?
At least that's what Patrick said.
Do not encourage him. Mr. Flynn?
Hope springs eternal, Mr. Chairman. And believe you me, I'm the last person on the planet who wants to go back and revisit engineering and financial.
I appreciate it.
But I do have some other questions.
Second to the last.
Probably hurt me more than hurt you, Steve. For Madsen, with them taking over Horizon, part of the port upgrade was to bring in new gantry cranes to handle larger vessels. Is that still part of the port project, or are we sticking with what we got?
It still is part of the project. The difference is, in the previous project, they were looking at 100 gauge cranes, meaning 100 feet between the rails. In the charrette, it was decided to go to 50 gauge, which would handle still 14 containers across.
Awesome.
And you save a whole lot of dock construction money if you're taking that 50 feet off. So what we have right now is 38. So it is an improvement to go to 50, and it's really functionally the most we probably need.
Okay. And is the project budget you showed, does that include our purchasing the cranes, or is it still?
It does.
It does.
Right.
Okay, so that's still an adult that we could maybe
Correct.
push off on Madsen and let them have authority over them.
And speaking to Hope Spring and Eternal, they've already alluded to wanting to talk about that.
Okay. Okay, that's good.
And that would shave about 27 million off of that number, given the cost of a 50 gauge crane.
Yeah. Okay, appreciate that. And just how is the Madison coming? I mean, they're a different network than Horizon
It's
was.
been pretty low key so far. They really have kept all the same Horizon people in place. The only difference is the Marion Davis
He left?
of
Announced his
Horizon
retirement.
has retired.
He has retired.
Oh, shit.
So, but Ken, no.
You can keep that out of the
but Kenny Gill.
I don't think I sent the memo
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, Kenny Gill, who's been kind of groomed for that position as time goes on anyway, has been installed as his replacement. And so it should be very, very little loss of continuity there. So we haven't really seen a lot of outside people come in for Matson at
No.
this point. It's been changing the names and business as usual so far.
Now, there's Marion is sticking around as a contractor, working for the next 6 months, which gets them through the end of the calendar year. And I think the reason behind that is because their preferential user agreement and their leases all expire at the end of
Sure.
December. So I think they want to keep him there for the continuity for when we get into renegotiating those documents with Matson.
Sure.
And then he can step away.
That was a good man, so.
Yes.
It's hard to see him go, but.
And how?
On the tug traffic, how much of that is tug and barge versus, say, Foss bringing in a tug from Seattle?
Almost all of it is Cook Inlet Tug and Barge. Sometimes AML will bring something different, but that's, not
And
associated with our-
and Northland is bringing it, well, Northland and AML same
Yeah,
thing anymore, but,
yeah.
Okay.
And in that tug traffic, really, we don't even count the tugs unless if they come to the dock to refuel or take on stores, that's when we count them in that number. If they're staying tied alongside a petroleum barge at a petroleum terminal until they're done, and then they're going to leave, and we don't see them for any business reason other than they're tugging the barge, then we don't count them. So it's anytime we're making revenue off a tug, we'll count them in those numbers.
Okay, that's interesting. And then could you, sorry Sharon to call you back up, could you back up to the tonnage slide? Because I had a question about the fuel. Timmy's here, so I'll torture him too. How do you explain, I was around for this, what's the differentiation between rail rack versus shoreside? Because we didn't drop our rail rack delivery that fast in 2005, 2006.
I'm going to defer that to the director.
That doesn't make sense to me.
No, it doesn't, because, but in the bookkeeping of the time, what that equated to was that 1 year plus a little bit that Flint Hills was producing naphtha.
So that's naphtha.
That's all naphtha.
Yep.
And that's why I can't wait for that 2005 bar to fall off, because it's been one of those anomalous banner years that were so out of the ordinary, it's been skewing the stats. So once that goes, what you'll see is a little bit more normal, plus or minus the economic perturbations that have caused things to drop off, and now we're trying to rebuild from it.
So the shoreside volumes basically represent, in the earlier years of this graph, aside from the brown bar, the petroleum products coming from Flint Hills and in North Pole to Anchorage, and then latter years into the terminal and then north to Fairbanks?
No. Anything that moves through the valve yard between terminals,
Terrace target number 1, got it.
that counts, because there's a tariff rate on that.
Okay.
And we've seen a lot of that. We continue to see some amount of that. Not so much since Flint Hills stopped, because they sold a lot of product to ASIG. And there were quite a few movements through the valve yards there. Now all that's coming across the dock. But Tesoro has 2 terminals. They receive in a terminal that's on railroad property, and we don't count the product in that tank as received until it goes through the valve yard and enters the port. Yes. So that's what the blue.
And actually, I'm glad you brought up the tariff. You'll recall that you guys approved a new tariff this year that's substantially different from the old one, and that's partly accounting for the increased revenues to date this year.
So just want to make sure I'm clear. So the stuff that's, you're saying that this tonnage in the blue category does not include fuel coming off the dock and going directly to a terminal.
Correct.
Only if it goes to the valve yard. and
Only if it goes to the
or-
valve yard shore side between terminals.
Okay, so if they're taking it off the truck rack and running it to the gas station across town.
That doesn't count there, it's already been received and accounted for in its initial receipt. Yeah, we don't count it twice, count it once.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Good question.
Cats.
Something you've always been involved in. Ms. Heil,
Oh,
any-
I did have one final question. How come I get strip searched even when I bring my Twitch card? Did you
You're on
put
that-
a watch
you're on
out on
that
me?
list.
Call ahead. If you call ahead, we can
Don't
say,
answer that
It's
question.
just profile.
Ms. Heil, any questions?
for your own good.
Yeah.
I have a couple of quick questions. Does the new Panama Canal and the larger size container ships going through there have any effect whatsoever on this port? Or is that something where the transfer point in LA or whatever puts it on a different size ship and it comes
Yeah,
up
because
here?
everything's delivered here on Jones Act carriers and nothing that huge. It makes no business sense to bring anything that big up here, so no, that's fun to watch, but it really has no effect on us.
I suspected as much. As far as your phasing, when you're talking about your 4 or 5 phases of construction at the port facility, are those things independently operational? I mean, if you complete phase 1 and that's all the money you get, or you complete phase 2 and that's all the money you get, will the port still essentially limp along under that condition?
But that's why
Or is
we
there
have,
some
right, that's why
problem there that has to be solved to continue the
you
all
need to do a
phases?
whole phase at once, but you don't have to do all of them to keep.
Sharon,
going.
go to your.
So each phase then can be independently constructed and
Yes.
utilized within that
Yeah.
phase, okay?
So, Mr. Chairman, the issue here is what Sharon pointed out, Terminal 1, right? Is that right?
That's right.
Where tote is?
That's 3.
That's
That's
3, 2,
thank you.
1, 1, 2.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, my vision is quite as sharp as it used to be. So that incursion creates an eddy at Terminal 3.
Right.
Where it's dump and silt all winter long, and we can't dredge there until the ice goes out. And that's what's costing these guys money.
Right.
And so, if you, one of the things. So if you shave that back and only do the POL and Terminal 1, and tote stuck at Terminal 2 indefinitely while you wait for more money,
Right.
you can get away with that, but you're gonna have those operational difficulties.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just trying to figure out, it's one of those things, if we can get by with certain phases. It's not really my
Right.
direct problem, but I am leading to my problem here in a second.
But the stuff they move out to 45 feet, and your dredging is not a big as big an issue.
Now, that phase 3, where we talk about pushing out the docks for both that isn't wake up tomorrow and it looks like this kind of thing. Now, that is
10 years out.
several phases in and of
Right,
itself.
that's
And
first.
nothing will start there until you have whatever you need to finish that.
Right.
Because that's the place you can't afford to get partway through and not be able to finish.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So that kind of leads me into my AMATS hat here, as opposed to my port engineer hat, which we all enjoy wearing occasionally.
That's a volunteer one.
On a volunteer basis. So if this expansion continues, and I'm assuming,
Modernization,
Right.
modernization.
Yeah.
I didn't memorize your slides.
He's got a
okay.
public affairs officer.
Language
Right
counts.
there, yes, okay. Are you expecting an increase in freight through that system? Is that part of this modernization or not? You're just
Which is
basically
why it's not
modernizing,
an expansion.
Right.
you're modernizing it.
There's no
so-
business case for making this port any bigger than it is now.
So you would not be able to move any more freight through there under the final completion?
Not true,
Okay,
because remember,
We could, there
those
was not much.
those docks get 2 container ships twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the week, it's available.
so you can move more freight through
So
the
you
day?
can move more freight without adding more dock.
Right.
I'll kill for the day when we can defend the building of an extension on the north end of the new one. But until that time, the availability we have in this dock today is about 40%, which means 60% of the time, we're staring out windows and nothing going on.
Okay.
You don't need a bigger port to manage the business we have now. What we need is a new one before this one falls in the water. That's what we need.
Okay, all right. That answers my questions. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Next up, we have on our informational thing, website update.
I know you're very, very excited to see this. It has been on your agenda for the last couple months. I'm Jamie Acton, Transportation Planner for AMATS and the Public Involvement Coordinator. So a couple months ago, took on the project of updating the AMATS website, and the TAC has already seen this presentation. So I will go through it briefly, just kind of explaining the process and what our goals were, and kind of show you the final product a bit. So I started off with a lot of feedback, and that feedback wasn't super positive. The feedback that I was receiving was, I can't find documents, there's too many broken links, there's obsolete information on there, and that was coming from the general public, the feds, committee members. Everybody had an opinion about the AMATS website. So I set out and I mapped out our site as it existed. I looked at the total number of pages. I looked at the images. I followed all the dead ends. We went from 103 pages down to 63. I inventoried the contents, the documents, the links, the URLs. I found all those duplicates, I found all the obsoletes, I found the 404 error messages, tracked all of that down. I looked at the analytics, I looked at page views, I looked at where are people coming from that are looking at our site. Are they even from it? Are they in Anchorage? Are they in Eagle River? Where are people accessing our site from, and what are the referrals? I found out that our number one referral to our website comes from the email blast that you receive through Constant Contact. Number two was a Google search for documents, and number three was basically social media. I did some functional testing, looked at the readability, it was way too high. Looked at the speed, it was too slow. Looked at browsers, was it functional with Chrome and Firefox and Safari and all these other browsers that are out there? Not really, it wasn't. It was very limited in its shareability. Keyword searches were very limited, and the navigation wasn't intuitive at all. So then I looked at a final piece, and that was site accessibility. I took into effect the Americans with Disability Act. I wanted to see how did our site work with a screen reader if you were visually impaired. I wanted to see how our PDFs functioned. I wanted to see, could it be translated into another language easily? And I got a lot of no's. So undertook this project with a lot to do. The design goal was basically to streamline it, to clean it up, make it simple, three clicks or less, and improve the navigation. I wanted to clean it up, less text, clean up all those old documents, obsolete projects, things that needed to be gone or had been in duplicate, triplicate in some places. I wanted it to be accessible for tablets, mobile devices. You can now pull this website up and it'll show on your phone, on your tablet, clean, easy, quickly. And then I wanted to improve the functionality of it. I wanted it to be faster within its limits. You know, we are part of an overall website that's housed through the municipality, so we do have some challenges. And so the goal was to make it faster, more responsive, intuitive, and relevant under the platform that we were currently using. So the design strategies basically were, you'll start to see a lot of icons on the website when I go through here. I wanted it to be mobile friendly, current and relevant information that people were actually looking for. When they're going out to look for our documents that are under a 30-day review, they should be easy to find, you know, things like that. And then I wanted it to be compatible with multiple browsers. That was really important because we're not all using Internet Explorer. We're using a multiple, you know, hosts of them. So the design challenges is the platform. You know, the municipality has SharePoint. I like to call it version 1.0, but it is version 1.3. SharePoint currently offers, I believe, they recently did an update at version 13. So we are operating at, I would almost say, a deficit. So our URL names, you'll see this as being an issue throughout the entire municipality. Since AMATS is housed under community development, you'll see muni.org/community development/planning/AMATS, and then you'll get your whatever.com or .org. And then I ran into what is AMATS and who cares, you know? So that ties us into our public involvement piece and the branding and really looking at, this could be somebody's first impression with the work that we do. And, you know, when you looked at the readability and the functionality and things like that, I would never come back, you know, if I didn't work for us. So that was a big piece of it also. And then the shareability. You know, we know social media is kind of the way that things are going. So we wanted to make sure that people could pin things, that people could post things, that it would be easily documented through our email blasts and our newsletters and all of those different things. So that was just a little bit of the background as to why we took it on, what we ran into, and then I'll just kind of show and run you through just real quick the changes. So right here, up front and center, you'll see this icon right here takes you to an online calendar that you can link to your Google Calendar, iCalendar, Outlook Calendar, Yahoo Calendars, all sorts of things. You can pull it up on your smartphone, you can look at it on your tablet, and obviously you can look at it on your desktop. So all of our social media icons are here. This is very important. Upcoming agendas. We've got agendas in 2 different places right now, and that was important. We just really wanted to make it super, super visible. And this isn't going to give me a back button, which is awesome. So, another update that needs to happen.
So you're not doing this yet?
See, here we go. Okay, so on this left nav side, you'll see, you know, we've got our agendas again, we've got our committee information, current projects, documents, GIS, partners, work programs, and then a site map. If you were ever lost in this website and you go to the site map, you're going to be able to find exactly where you want to go. So that's really been a streamline and an improvement and just really kind of making this whole thing a little more intuitive. So basically, I won't keep you for too long, but if there's anything specific that you have questions about or would like to see, or are wondering where the heck did this go, just let me know and I can direct you. We did not, there was not a lot of things that were actually removed. They were actually just kind of replaced or rehoused or updated, or, you know, rather than having 4 of them, we cut it down to 1. So, are there any questions?
I think there will be, but anybody from the crowd, questions, comments? I feel like I have to ask that question, even though I'm sure most of them don't look at this website very often. But Mr. Peterson, any questions or comments?
So you said we still have to go through community development to transportation to get to AMATS.
Yeah, and that's just it's the way that the SharePoint is set up. So if you're in this departments piece, this is, you'll really see, you know, if we had an AMATS, we would be uni.org.amats. But unfortunately, the way that we're set up and the way that the organization of the website is, this is what we've got. So it's incredibly long.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Something good to explore.
Yes.
Cindy, anything?
This is an example. Can you show us where the policies and procedures are?
Absolutely.
And if you have comments for how the Muni website can be improved, you might want to pass those on to somebody.
Okay, sounds good. So let's see here. I believe in about, let's see, governing documents, and you'll see operating agreement, policy procedures, our 2011 CERT review, and then all of these will be updated to show the links, map of our study area, and then related documents, related committees, an MPO profile, and then contact information for AMATS. So really tried to streamline the look and the feel and the amount of the text that was involved.
Thank you.
Okay, the only comment I've got is I think the same one Mr. Peterson was building on is that it's awfully tough to get to the website. And unless you know it's there, when you go to the Muni webpage, it's
buried.
You cannot find it. I mean, does not exist under the Muni. There's no tags, there's no hint, no nothing. So that would be my major concern, is that even though we've got a great website now, it's still buried about 4 layers deep into areas that even myself, it takes me longer than it probably should, but
right.
you know, you have to know that it's buried in planning and. So I would really echo the other comments here that we need to find a way to get a better link from the Muni website into this site.
I agree, and I would definitely love to work on that. That's definitely one of my biggest pet peeves. And you'll see a lot, just as reference, when we do contracted work, a lot of times we end up having our contractors build something that takes them off-site, just because it has more functionality. So sadly, that's the case, that it takes them off the site, but we're limited in our capabilities. So yeah, I would definitely look at that. See,
new day coming, new people,
I know, all
new
kinds of stuff
opportunities,
could be
you know, who
happening.
knows? Could be a better time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seize the opportunity.
Exactly. The next information report C, bikeway design workshop and letter on intersection design. Mr. Lyon?
Joni, are you going to start that out?
Yeah. I'm just for the record, I'm Joni Wilm, the AMATS Bike Ped Coordinator. And this letter before you with the AMATS logo on it, this is a letter from our Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. It did go to the Technical Advisory Committee a couple of weeks ago, and it was received well by them, and they thanked Zach, who's on our BPAC committee, for coming forward with the information. Let Zach describe the letter. He was involved in crafting it with our other BPAC members, but just a few points to note out. It's a letter highlighting a safety concern that they're bringing forward. I don't think the intent of the letter is to tell anyone how to design a roadway, but they're just trying to bring forward a safety concern, and just also to let you know that we've had some ongoing discussion about this issue with the BPAC and DOT. It's been great to talk with them, and we had a really productive bikeway design workshop last night. So we are continuing to discuss the issue, and this is bringing it forward, and Zach will talk about the letter.
Okay.
Thanks, Joni. And yeah, as Joni mentioned, I'm a member of the BPAC. So is Tim Casednar from Spinard, and we've been talking with Department of Transportation staff for, gosh, probably a couple months now about really this one design issue that's in the context of some really important improvements on our roadways. And that's the good news, is we are seeing an expansion of on-road bicycling facilities in Anchorage, and those on-road facilities are important because they allow folks who use our great trail system to access everything they're trying to get to from the trails, whether it's stores or restaurants or their homes or their places of work. So I think that's the broader context. And on the assumption that not everyone has read every letter of this letter, I'll just explain it real quickly. Some of the projects going in over the next couple of summers, and the exact date of that has been fluid, which is why we wanted to bring this to your attention sooner rather than later. A lot of these projects involve bike lanes, some of which are on long roadways such as C Street. And the issue of contention is design of the bike lane at the intersection. And that's an important issue because the intersection has the highest potential for turning conflicts based on collision data. Most car-bike collisions in Anchorage are either left or right hooks. Those are things that take place at intersections. So it's a major safety issue. The Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee wrote this letter because the design proposed by DOT, in many cases, not all, terminates the bike lane in advance of the intersection, and bicyclists and automobile drivers are left to sort of figure it out. And what in many cases are high volume, relatively high speed roadways that in some cases have a lot of confusing lane change actions going on right in advance of the intersection. And fortunately, there's a lot of guidance from the Federal Highway Administration in the form of the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, the MUTCD. AASHTO has some very specific guidance more recently. NACTO has even more detailed guidance about the proper configuration of bike lanes as they approach and as they go through intersections. And to summarize what all these engineering standards and guidance tell us is that basically more predictability, more certainty is safer because it delineates where bikes are supposed to be and where cars are supposed to be. And I think at this point in Anchorage's development, when we're seeing a significant expansion in bike facilities, that kind of certainty is actually more important because a lot of drivers and a lot of bicyclists don't understand the proper relationship and the proper placement of cars and bikes. So it's really important to do the infrastructure right because a lot of drivers are going to be interacting with these facilities for the first time. And we want them to have the proper understanding of the safest relationship between bikes and cars. I mentioned the crash data. It's safer in most cases for bikes to be on the road in a highly visible location, behaving in a predictable manner, not sort of zigzagging on and off the road. So all that the BPAC is asking is that the State Highway Department not terminate the bike lanes, but continue them up to intersection stop bars as recommended by the MUTCD, by AASHTO, by NACTO. Actually, Joni mentioned the bike design workshop last night. State of the art is actually to continue bike lanes through the intersections in many cases. We aren't even asking for that. That'd be great. We're just asking for sort of minimum compliance with federal standards and continuing the bike lanes up to those stop bars. There are some pictures in the letter, and the pictures do a really nice job of showing, hey, you've got a bike lane on the street. It's been going for a while. Continue it up to that stop bar, provided drivers with clarity. I guess in closing, to explain what's different between BPAC's recommendation and the current design proposed by DOT, rather than the pictures that you see in the letter here, which have the bike lane continue out to the bar, DOT in some cases recommends terminating the bike lane prematurely, having what they call an escape ramp, which would be a sort of a ramp going off onto a sidewalk or a multi-use path, and then the bicyclist would enter the intersection at the location where in some cases you would find a crosswalk. Now the problem with that is that would position the bicyclist to the right of right turn lanes. The MUTCD actually explicitly prohibits bike lanes being on the inside of right turn lanes because it increases the likelihood of a right hook, which, as I mentioned, is the most common form of bike-car collisions in Anchorage. I'm sure y'all have all seen on the streets why those collisions are so common, because we don't have bike lanes, because folks are on the sidewalk, because it's very hard for automobile drivers when they're making a right-hand turn, not only to assess all the cars around them, but also to see a bicyclist who might be coming down the sidewalk or the mixed-use path, who may be hidden by shrubbery or a light pole or pedestrians. It's harder for cars to see those people. So the BPAC is suggesting that it's much safer, consistent with federal standards, that bicyclist, when approaching an intersection, remain on the street to the inside of that turning car to avoid those what are frequently right hook turning motions. I'm happy to answer any questions about sort of the discussions we've had with DOT or why the BPAC is recommending the continuation of the bike lane up to the stop bar, if y'all have questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank both of you. Anybody from the crowd have any questions or comments about the letter? Okay. Mr. Peterson, any questions you care to follow up on? Mr. Steele?
Sorry, I missed the meeting last night at REI. It was other items, but and the Arctic intersection is a good example of where that ends at the top there, and you're sitting there, and probably half of the people are turning there. So it is a conflict is an issue, and it's not going to be easily solved. I'm glad that steps are taken to improve bike lanes, and hopefully, I guess there's a project going on with 27th between Spinard and Blueberry.
Correct. Lori Skanke is the project manager on that one, I think, and that's going to be a bike boulevard.
Yeah.
Not all intersections have right of way to have bike lanes continue up to the stop bar, and really VPAC's concern is very narrow. It's for those intersections where there is sufficient right of way to have a bike lane, want that bike lane to continue up to the stop bar.
It's a training item. I mean, you've got to train, all the drivers have to be trained to understand the markings in the first place, and then as to just always be aware to look.
Right, and then, yeah, an elemental part of that is drivers understanding that, hey, that, you know, bikes have a place to be on the road. This is their place, and one of the things that the consultant talked about last night at the workshop is how, you know, in cities that recently have deployed bike infrastructure, there's this learning curve, which is a positive thing for both drivers and bicyclists. And the good thing about it is you see really significant increases in bike ridership as people find a safe place to be on the roadway. We just don't want to make sort of half-baked facilities that lead to a dangerous situation at an intersection.
The more we get, the better it will go. Hopefully some of the accidents won't happen, or won't happen as frequently, because we'll know what to expect, so, and look for.
Thank you. Ms. Hall?
I'm trained.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Articulate and well received, I think.
Thanks.
Okay, we have plowed our way through the informational items. Committee comments. Mr. Peterson, do you have any comments you'd care to make for the behalf of everyone here?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Steele, any?
No, a lot of diverse information today, and glad to see it.
Okay. So? Okay, I'm fine also. So our next meetings, we have a series of technical, freight, travel demand, model, CMPs in the next month, as well as our policy committee meetings on July 23rd. Mr. Lyon has one further.
One quick announcement. Did include in your packet here the first edition of Bike Life Anchorage. There'll be another one in the fall, but Joni put this together. You'll see that similar thing down south, but she worked with the contractor that was doing those down south. You'll see some good articles in there on formation of the coastal trail. There's an article from Chief Mew on where bikes are allowed and where folks should do. So it's a pretty good publication that we just have put together with the AMATS funding. So take a look.
All right, thank you. With that, we are adjourned.
Hey, sorry we were late.